Yo guys, welcome to the Zelda fiction. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto rise the Revanchist Empire and got Harem with Fem Elzumi? Part 1. Huge shout out to Forgottenkami for this story. If you end up liking this video, please consider subscribe, so without further ado, let's get into the video. In the private training grounds of the Namikaze estate, a mother and father were watching in pride as their 5-year-old daughter went through a basic taijutsu kata. Sloppily throwing a last combo. Punch, kick, punch, she happily turned to face her parents. Ha-chan. Tu-chan. How was that? She yelled, her shoulder-length vibrant red hair bouncing as she spun around, stumbled, and landed on all fours. You're getting better every time, Kasumi-chan. Carry on like that and you'll be the best kunoichi in Konoha in no time. The man stepped forwards and picked her up in a warm hug. He stood at 5'11" tall, with spiky sun-kissed blonde hair and light blue eyes. He was dressed in a standard Konoha outfit with his hit-8 on his forehead. He smiled fondly at her as he put her back on her feet. You were great, Kasumi-chan, we're both very proud of you, the woman said as she knelt down and embraced her daughter. She stood at 5'4". Her hair, the same color as her daughter's, fell all the way down to her waist. She wore a short-sleeved orange blouse under a black housedress and heeled kunoichi sandals. Dusting of the dirt from the girl's cloth, she turned her around and pushed her towards the large house. Come on. That's enough training for today. Let's go get something to eat. From the split in an otherwise curtained third-floor window, a young boy scowled as he watched his family walk up to the house. Flashback. 10 months earlier. But, Otu-san, why can't you just train us both at the same time? I want to be a ninja too. The child pleaded as he tried to ignore the smug looks his younger twin sister was sending him. He already knew that it was a lost cause, his sister always got what she wanted. The whole village loved her. The few times Naruto had been out, he had been glared and whispered at as if he had committed some heinous crime. Of course that was only when he went alone. If he was with his family, people would mostly ignore him. I said no, Naruto. You'll get training when you start at the academy like the other children. Kasumi-chan is special and needs the extra training so she can control her power and use it properly, Minato bit out in a rather fed-up voice, leaving no room for argument. Seeing her husband's patience wearing thin, Kushina decided to step in before someone said something they would regret. She understood her son's disappointment. If she had been put in the same position when she was his age, she would have ranted about it to no end. Unfortunately for him, Kasumi's training was going to revolve around getting her ready to use the Kikbi's-yaki. There would be a lot of physical training at first, but that was only so that her body would be able to withstand the strain that the usage of the yaki would put her under. Well, they could include Naruto in the training so that he got a head start on the physical conditioning that he would be put through at the academy. Minato felt that it would be best to focus their attention on their daughter in case something went wrong. Naruto would be angry at them, she knew that, but she knew that they would easily be able to make it up to him later on. Kushina knelt down in front of her son and gave him a gentle but firm smile. Stop arguing with your father and go to your room, Naruto-kun. Naruto scowled angrily but didn't say anything. He spun around and stomped up the stairs. When he got to his room, he flopped down in a corner with his back to the wall and hugged his knees to his chest. Stupid parents. Stupid Kasumi. Why can't they just train us both at the same time? Because they're idiots, that's why. Jai. Naruto jumped to his feet, swinging his head wildly from side to side, trying to find who the booming voice belonged to. Who's there? The voice tinted with amusement. I'm in your head, brat. Just think your answers, you look stupid talking to yourself. Naruto's eyes widened as he comically covered his ears with his hands. What do you mean you're in my Kikbi? A small appreciative chuckle echoed through his head. Indeed. The tone became a bit annoyed. Did you not understand me when I said to think your answers? He flinched and dipped his head apologetically. Sorry. Contrary to what many would expect, Naruto wasn't afraid of the fact that he had a several hundred-foot-high creature of destruction talking in his head. He already knew about the big soul being sealed in him. He and his sister had been informed of the Kikbi's true fate shortly after their 3rd birthday when Kasumi had accidentally let out a burst of its yaki. Naruto sighed and slumped back down to the floor dejectedly. In truth, he hadn't expected to be able to convince his father to let him join in the training sessions. Ever since they had been told about the Kikbi, Naruto had come to notice how their parents always seemed to favor Kasumi. He had noticed it even before then. But he had always thought it was somehow his fault, that he was either doing something wrong that made them love his sister more, or that he was just childishly blowing things out of proportion. But once he knew that there was something different, something totally out of his control, that made his parents prefer his sister to him, he slowly began giving up on them. He made overtures from time to time. He would suggest that they go to the cultural museum rather than to the latest Yuki Fujikawa's film that Kasumi wanted to see. He would suggest that they eat gyudon rather than Kasumi's favorite ramen. It wasn't that he didn't like Yuki Fujika's films or ramen. In fact, he was quite fond of Princess Gale's adventures. It was simply a test to see if they would ever choose him over her. They never did. Naruto knew that he was a strange child. He didn't have any friends, but he did know that he was the only kid around who spent more time reading than he did playing. During some of his few trips to the public library, he had heard people muttering about it being unnatural for such a young child to be looking for books on chakra, taijutsu or history, and that it must be the Kyūbi's influence showing through. It was the sort of comment that really hurt. Not because they were being mean to him, but because he knew that if a Kasumi went looking for the exact same information they would praise her as child prodigy. The whole village knew that the Kyūbi's power was sealed in his sister. They loved her because they believed she would one day be their most powerful guardian. Some already said she would make a good Gondai, which was rather sad considering she couldn't walk straight yet. He snorted. The entire village hated him. They saw him as a reminder of how powerless they had been that day and as an insult to those who died that fateful night. The Kyūbi's demonic voice once again sounded in his head. If you're quite finished drowning yourself in pity, maybe we can discuss some things. Naruto flinched reflexively. Having that voice in his head would take some getting used to. How come you can talk to me now? For some reason he got the distinct impression of a nonchalant shrug. I've always been able to talk to you, brat. I just didn't see the point. Anyway, I've got a proposal. I'll help you train since your parents don't want to, but you have to promise not to tell anyone about me. He blinked. He hadn't even thought of telling his parents. But then again, he hadn't intended to not tell them either. He just hadn't thought about it one way or the other. He let his right leg straighten out and then rested his elbow on his left knee and his chin on his elbow. Settled in the new and more comfortable position, he reflected on the matter. The fact that he hadn't even considered telling them was strange in and of itself. He had seen Kasumi running amok around the house, searching high and low, just to tell their parents that she had seen a funny paper butterfly. And yet he, upon finding that he could talk to a Bijk in his head, had not even contemplated telling them. He pushed the thoughts aside. It wasn't that strange, given the division that was growing between him and the rest of the Namikaze family. Nonetheless, he found it suspicious that Kyūbi asked him not to talk about it. Why can't I tell them? Because, fool, if they find out your father will change the seal so that I can't talk to you. Then my life will be even more boring and you won't have anyone to train you. So, what do you say? Naruto grunted at her snappish tone, but acknowledged the veracity of her statement. Okay. I promise. Now, what sort of training can you help me with? Then flashback. Come on, brat. Break's over. Get back to work. Naruto sighed and stepped back, letting the curtain close and the darkness swallow his room. As it turned out, the Kyūbi's help was more of the motivational sort. He snorted, slave driver was more like it. He was either training or learning something at every waking moment of the day, usually combining more than one exercise at a time. It was hard work, very hard work, but the results were obvious. Or they would be obvious if anyone paid the slightest bit of positive attention to him. He still had to do all his research by himself. Not that that bothered him. Kyūbi would simply be an extra eye that would help him shave off even the slightest imperfections. The demon was also a fountain of historical knowledge, oftentimes pointing out mistakes in the history books where they had been adjusted things to make what really happened seem more acceptable. Naruto bent his knees a little and pushed up, flipping over as he sprung towards the ceiling. As soon as his feet made contact he channeled chakra into them, sticking to the upside-down surface with practiced ease. He then let a constant flow of chakra seep into the seal-engraved bracelets on his wrists and ankles. The seals were one of Minato's earlier creations that, by feeding off of a constant stream of chakra, made it harder for the user to move, as if they were submerged in a heavy and viscous liquid. Naruto had salvaged the equipment when Kasumi had chucked it aside. Her large and uncontrolled chakra reserves making her produce too large a flow and leaving her unable to move at all. Feeling the restriction wash over his body, Naruto settled into a stance. The darkness training was a method that forced him to rely on proprioception rather than vision to perfect and memorize the flow between stances. His father had personally placed privacy seals in all the bedrooms in the Namikaze mansion, and he kept those in his room activated at almost all times, so there weren't any outside audio disturbances. Being mostly deprived of the two senses that shinobi most relied upon, he was able to pay much more attention to the intricacies of his own movements. He weaved gracefully from one stance to the next, never faltering from in his upside-down position, never wavering under the increased resistance. His breathing remained steady, almost silent as he punched, kicked and turned with increasing speed. His execution was perfect, not a single wasted movement, nor a bead of sweat on his body. He came to a stop in the same position he had started, panting slightly from the drain on his reserves, but holding himself impeccably nonetheless. But now increase your chakra flow and start again. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. Naruto ignored the glare from the pink-haired thing with an overly large forehead that passed for a librarian as he walked out of the main Konoha library. While searching the Namikaze library back at the mansion, he had found that, while there were numerous advanced books and priceless scrolls on Genjutsu, there was a distinct lack of low-level material. Knowing better than to dive into such a potentially dangerous subject without a firm knowledge of the basics, he had resigned himself to making the bothersome journey through the unwelcoming streets of Konoha so as to find the appropriate material. He glanced down at the book in his hands. An introduction to Genjutsu. Betting the book hadn't been hard, other than the expected muttering and not so discreet curses. He knew that Genjutsu wasn't only considered a ninja art, a careful observer could probably find at least one low-level seal in every house in Konoha. Kyūbi had also told him about the various storage seals and safety seals that daimyos used, as well as some of the masterfully crafted blades of old that allowed skilled samurai to use techniques that could easily rival NA rank jutsu. So, while he would certainly be proficient in ninjutsu with his already mid-genin level reserves, Genjutsu with his Uzumaki legacy, and other arts through sheer hard work, otherwise known as Kyūbi the slave driver, he felt that Genjutsu was a skill that he could truly dedicate himself to. He knew that there was probably a part of him that also hoped to gain his father's favor by following in his footsteps, but that was a childish thought. He stopped, frowning as he stood out of the way of the passing pedestrians. The thought may be childish, but I'm not even 6 yet. I am a child. It's normal for me to think childish thoughts. He nodded to himself and walked on. But another frown creased his brow. It may be normal for me to think childish thoughts. But is it normal for me to know that I'm thinking childish thoughts? He shook his head in exasperation. These leaps and jumps and ponderings of logic were getting more and more frequent. He had always been smart, so was Kasumi. But ever since he had made contact with the Kyūbi, at times it was as if he had the input of many people put together. He pushed the idea aside, flipping his book open and starting to read so as to distract himself. He skimmed with mild interest through the preface and the author's personal ramblings before coming to the first chapter. Genjutsu ranking bar and scale of progress. As an ancient art, the practitioners of Genjutsu are scaled by a ranking different to that of ninja skills. The lowest level is that of novice. At this level, the greatest concern is to learn how to write, inscribe, etc. The importance of a well-written kanji is the first priority to any aspiring Genjutsu user, since the consequences of a poorly written array can be disastrous. Fortunately, a bad seal is more liable to simply not produce any sort of result than it is to explode. The second level is that of journeyman. At this level, the Genjutsu user should concentrate on increasing his or her repertoire. Very few ever progress to the higher stages of this level, since it requires both dedication and considerable intellect. The Genjutsu user must learn to understand how the seal works and how to modify it to produce the desired effects. The third level is that of master. At this level, the Genjutsu user dedicates him or her to the creation of original seals. In ancient times, the only way to progress to this level was by submitting an original seal to a guild of masters and having them judge it worthy. Very few ever progress to such a level of competency, to the point where, at any given time, it is often possible to count the number of true seal masters on the fingers of one's hands. Perhaps the greatest and most renowned examples of these masters' skills are the summoning contracts and their ability to bend the laws of time and space. Naruto frowned as he turned the page. The book was probably a good 50 years old, so he guessed that it may be a bit out of date, but he was certain that he had heard his father and godfather saying that space-time Genjutsu was at a level beyond master, since Jiraiya, an accredited master, was incapable of it. He shrugged and went on reading. He was far from that level yet, so there was no point worrying about it. Generic sealing technique. Since the advent of academic ninja training, the usage of the basic sealing techniques, commonly referred to as storage seals or storage scrolls, has been considered an academy-level skill. The practicality of said technique, not only in missions but in everyday life, is such that many civilians such as daimyos, bankers, secretaries and merchants also use the less chakra-expensive versions on a regular basis. When in use, the sealed object is placed in a closed spherical space often referred to as a pocket dimension. While inside this space, the sealed object is outside of all external influences, including the passing of time. This makes it an extremely useful tool for transporting fresh foods and supplies without taking up too much space or weight. Whilst the usage of the generic sealing technique is a low-level skill accessible to any chakra user, the creation is an entirely different matter. The most basic storage seals are classed as novice-level Genjutsu and as such are usually not attempted before reaching the rank of Chunin. To create a low-level generic sealing array, one must take into consideration the overall weight of Umph. Naruto let out a dull grunt as he was sent sprawling to the ground, barely keeping hold of the book in his hand. He looked up and had to restrain a groan when he saw a group of teenage boys crowding around him. Then he saw the group of teenage girls standing behind them, giggling stupidly as they watched a big strong man. Bigby snorted. Stupid humans and their stupid pre-mating rituals. Naruto sighed and put the book in his back pocket. He knew he would get in trouble if it was damaged, even if it wasn't his fault. He got back to his feet and kept an indifferent facade as they started shoving him around. He didn't respond to their jeers, nor defend himself against the rough contact. He had learned that it was best not to resist because it made them lose interest faster. Hey. What's going on here? He snapped his wandering mind back to the present when the angry female voice made itself known. Stop that right now. He turned with a raised eyebrow as the woman stomped over, her glowering expression sending the teens running. She rushed over to him and bent to his eye level with her hands resting on her knees. Are you alright? Naruto blinked in surprise and then blushed at the genuine concern in both her voice and her onyx black eyes. Not trusting his voice, he nodded dumbly. She smiled down at him warmly and set about straightening his ruffled clothes and patting his unruly hair. I don't know what those ruffians were thinking. Their parents should be ashamed. Are you sure you're alright, dear? Naruto remained speechless as she fussed over him more than his own mother ever had. He knew that she was an uchiha, her black eyes and black hair was an easy giveaway. He briefly wondered if she'd be so nice if she realized who he was. You're Kushina-chan's little boy, aren't you? Well, that answered that. He nodded back once, slowly and hesitantly. She had been nice so far, but there was no telling what she would be like once she received confirmation of who he was. To his mild surprise, she just grinned at him and picked up 2 grocery bags that he hadn't noticed. With her kind smile still in place, she tilted her head towards the clan district. Come on, I'll walk you home. Naruto blinked. That's okay, you don't have to. I don't want to be a bother. Nonsense. Besides, it's on my way. Come on. When they got to the front gates of the Namikaze mansion, she rummaged around in her bags, fished out a small pack of sweets, gave them to him, ruffled his hair, then walked off with a cheery wave and yet another smile, leaving a dumbfounded Naruto staring at her retreating form owlishly with a small pack of candy in his hand. He didn't even know her name. An almost 7-year-old Namikaze Naruto walked down the stairs 2 of the Namikaze mansion. Correction, he was gliding down the stairs with a grace no 7-year-old had any right to possess as he constantly expelled a small air of chakra from his feet, creating a cushion on which to walk on. There wasn't much point to the exercise, but it did allow him to improve both his control and his reserves with every step he took. Due to his rigorous training, he was quite tall for his age, with compact and well-defined muscles. His chakra reserves were large for his age. Nowhere near Kasumi's of course, but enough that he could now create a maximum of 4 shadow clone to help speed up his learning. As a result, and thanks to his dedication to the task, while his overall level as a shinobi was roughly that of a third-year academy student, his Kenjutsu level was already that of a journeyman. He and Kasumi had started the academy shortly after their 6th birthday, along with many of the other clan heirs. He was the strongest in the year by a fairly large margin, but through a combination of certain instructors trying to sabotage him and his own lack of showing off, he was classed as nothing more than an average student. For a while he had entertained the idea of showing his true abilities and taking the number 1 position from his sister, but reason had quickly caught up to him and he had abandoned the idea. If word got out that the demon brat was showing up the class prodigy, the princess of Konoha no, things were much easier if he stayed unnoticed. Reaching the ground floor, he passed through the dining room, paying no attention to his family as he headed for the kitchen. He stepped through the door and almost bumped into one of the maids carrying Kasumi's food. Ramen again. He rolled his eyes. It's no surprise she's so short. She rarely eats anything but ramen and sweets. With her parents spoiling her too much to make her eat properly, she's lucky she has your Yauki to compensate for the lack of nutrients, or she'd be in a pitiful state. Ma. Leave it alone, kid, it's her problem. Besides, it's kind of funny when and if she starts making a name for herself, they'll probably call her the midget of Konoha. He snorted in amusement. It was an appropriate name. If he was that short, he'd be rather insecure about it. The only reason the other kids didn't tease her about it was because she was the most popular girl around. Ignoring the mild glare from the cook, Naruto fixed himself a healthy meal. Some vegetables, lots of meat for protein, a good bit of dairy product for calcium and some fruit for dessert. Putting everything on a tray, he left the kitchen, passed through the dining room and back towards the stairs. He didn't spare a glance for the house's other inhabitants. He didn't even ask himself if they noticed his absence. Honestly, he had stopped caring. Just as he placed his foot on the first step, a part of his family's conversation caught his attention. And Naruto's birthday party. He stopped. Hearing his mother mention his name was a rare enough occurrence to catch his attention, although the fact that she did so without even noticing that he was there was rather sad. He shook the thought away. He ignored them, they ignored him, and everyone went about their life happily enough. His father's voice carried around the corner. Of course I'll wait until after their birthday party. From what Jiraiya-sensei told me it'll probably take at least a few months to even sense nature chakra, but a year or so to master sage mode. That's why I'm only doing it now that the village has fully recovered. Asumi's voice floated over. Hey. Otu-san. What is sage training? Is it cool? Can I do it? The Yondai chuckled at his daughter's enthusiasm. Sage training is a special technique that the toads will be teaching me, Kasumi-chan. It'll make your Two-san even stronger. I'm sure you'll be able to do it, but you'll have to wait until you're a bit older, okay? Asumi pouted cutely, and Kushina looked at her husband worriedly, speaking in a low voice that Naruto was barely able to hear over his sister's slurping. Are you sure she can learn it, Minato-kun? What if it creates a problem with Kyūbi's Yaki? Minato frowned. I hadn't thought of that. I'll ask the Toad Elders what they think. Besides, there's still a long ways to go before she reaches that level. Naruto made his way up the stairs as their discussion turned back to uninteresting topics. When he was back in his room he sat at the desk, placing his tray down in front of him and started to eat, taking the time to properly chew all his food. He tilted his head to one side as he swallowed a piece of beef. Have you ever heard of sage training, Kyūbi? I know it wasn't mentioned in any of the books or scrolls I've read. There was a pause, which he assumed was due to the demon thinking back over centuries of memories before supplying an answer. No, I haven't. There have been a few nicknames with the word sage in it, but nothing to indicate that it actually means anything. Sort of like that old guy Sarutobi is called the god of shinobi when there's really nothing godly about him. The closest I can think of is the six-path sage, and even then I doubt it meant much. Naruto frowned as he crunched on a juicy carrot. Six-path sage. I think there was mention of him in one of the rare scrolls in father's library, something about a rare dijutsu, but it made it sound like he was just a myth. He got the impression of a mental shrug and he swore he heard some hesitation. He probably is. When I first heard of him it was almost 100 years after my birth, but from what I heard he died even before I existed. The thing you have to know is that, back then, samurai had a lot more influence than ninja. The ninja clans and the subsequent clan wars were only just starting, and I really didn't pay much attention to them. The rumor I heard was that this six-path sage somehow managed to kill a 10-tailed demon, split it into 9, and then went on to create what would become ninjutsu you humans practice. Naruto almost choked on his food. Are you serious? That's how the Bijuu were created. The scroll said something about him being the founder of modern ninjutsu, but to actually create the 9 Bijuu. Kyūbi growled. Don't be ridiculous, boy. There are only 9 of us, although I'm loathing classifying those 8 mindless beasts in the same order as myself. Your father is considered one of the greatest seal masters ever, though that title is debatable, and he doesn't even know how he survived sealing me. I wasn't even in control of myself at the time. Do you really think that a mere human could actually kill a demon that was supposedly even more powerful than me? Naruto paused in his meal. He thought back to the introduction to Fukinjutsu that he had read when he started his studies and how it claimed that seal masters had once been able to create the summoning contracts, something he knew his father couldn't replicate. The Flying Thunder God was an incredibly impressive work of Kenjutsu, but it was still not as impressive as the contracts that bound entire families of the great beasts that were summons animals. If that had been the level of a master back then, who was to say that they weren't capable of killing a demon and splitting its soul? Not that he would suggest such a thing to his tenant. The fox may not be able to harm him, but it could give him a killer headache. And Naruto felt that the fox was hiding something from him, several important things in fact. Naruto went back to his meal. You're probably right, no human could possibly be that strong. Hey, do you think soul manipulation could be another higher branch of Kenjutsu? Like space-time manipulation is? A non-committal grunt echoed through his mind as the beast let his change of subjects slide. How the hell should I know, Brad? You'll just have to work that out yourself. Now finish eating and get back to your training. Stifling a sigh, he finished his meal and pushed the tray to one side. He pulled a scroll open and set it down on his desk. The Art of Sealing. Fujikawa style. Like most of the works on Kenjutsu it was handwritten, and in this case it was his father's handwriting. Naruto was fortunate enough that, unlike most who took an interest in Kenjutsu, he didn't have to travel to study more seals. He knew that when Jiraiya, and his father to a lesser extent, were at the journeyman stage they had to gather information from many other countries, both allied and enemy. Naruto, however, had the collective results of years of research at his disposal. The Codex of Sealing was a compendium of all the higher quality seals that Minato had seen and created, and he was still adding to it. Then there were other, lesser, works such as the one in front of him that, while interest, didn't merit a place with the cream of the crop. Naruto knew that it would still take him years of study to master it all since, unlike his sister, he couldn't use an army of shadow clones. But with his intelligence, which had continued evolving and had now grown to startling levels, he knew that he was well on his way to surpassing his father. That to work. Knowing better than to roll his eyes, Naruto crossed his hands in the appropriate seal and pooled as much chakra as he could. When he felt that he was near his limit, he released it, letting the jutsu take shape. Shadow clone. With a pop and some smoke, a single clone came into existence and went straight to reading at the desk. Naruto panted in mild exhaustion. While he could create a shadow clone without draining himself, Kyūbi had instructed him to always use as much chakra as he safely could. Firstly, because it would allow the clone to live longer, thus study more, and secondly because it was a good way to improve his chakra stores. Better move on, brat. You know what to do. Naruto nodded and jumped to the ceiling. His execution of taijutsu and kinjutsu stances was near perfect, so he didn't bother with darkness training anymore, but the upside down and resistance bracelets part was still very much in use. He winced at the steady drain on his already diminished reserves, but refused to let tiredness slow him down as he rapidly worked his way through more and more advanced forms. Physical training was what took up most of his time nowadays, to the point where he was often performing push-ups or squats while reading. The only day that he didn't train his body was Sunday, and that was so that it could recuperate in preparation for the next week. With his mind being so advanced, the physical training was necessary to strengthen his body and force his cells to create more physical energy, since the spiritual energy that compassed the other half of his chakra was so abundant. It was a lot of hard work, but the results were starting to show. Soon enough he'd be able to create 2 shadow clones without draining himself. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. As you all know, today is the monthly ranking tournament. Iruka smirked. There were few things that could make a chattering academy student shut up as effectively as his big head jutsu, but the ranking tournament was one of them. Unsurprisingly, Kiba was letting out whoops of joy, arrogantly stating that he would soon take the top spot. Satsuki was glaring competitively at Kasumi, silently planning her strategy to move up from the second best position in the class. Ino and Sakura were bantering over who would be the best placed. He shook his head and got back on track. Yes, I know you're all excited, but this time it'll be a bit different. With so many clan heirs in this class, you've been gathering quite a bit of interest, so, rather than just your teachers, your families have exceptionally been invited to watch. Sakura's hand shot up, but she didn't wait to be called on. But Iruka-sensei, if the tournament is today, how are we supposed to tell our parents? Don't worry, Sakura, Hokage-sama has had his Anbu take care of that. Now, take the time, prepare, because you'll be fighting in front of some of the most important people in Konoha. Naruto sighed and looked out the window as his classmates started chatting enthusiastically about how they were going to impress the village leaders. He doubted that any of them had bothered looking at the statistics of ninja ranks, so they were probably ignorant of the fact that less than 60% of career ninja advanced past genin rank, and even less became genin. After all, there was a reason that the higher-ranking ninja were called elites, and clans, such as the uchiha, who produced large numbers of genin, were so revered. They really don't realize how pathetic they are. A small smile curved his lips as he heard Kyūbi snort in amusement. The demon always loved it when he spoke of humans, as if he wasn't one, and, strangely enough, he was more and more enjoying the fact that the demon didn't refer to him as a human either. He closed his eyes and focused on some of the seals he had been studying. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. Uchiha Satsuki and Ami, please step onto the ring. Izumi watched her little sisters fight with distaste. While Satsuki was at an acceptable level for someone her age, the girl she was fighting against was not only weak, but she was obviously a fangirl. It was a little-known fact that after the Third Great Shinobi War, the council had voted that academy standards be slowly relaxed to a less demanding level, placing an emphasis on history and academics rather than skill and tactics. The result was a generation of weak-hearted and poorly skilled graduates, most of whom were either sent back to the academy or chose another path after failing their Jumnin Sensei's test. Compared to her own progression, graduated top of her class at 7, promoted to Chunin at 10, and now, at 12, a fully fledged member of Anbu and well on her way to becoming captain, the differences were glaring. The only reason Konoha still held its standing as strongest of the hidden villages was because of its many clans who gave their children extra training and the importance that was placed on teamwork. Izumi held her expressionless mask in place as the purple-haired Kunoichi wannabe fawned over every hit her sister landed on her, as if each touch were an intimate gesture. She frowned slightly when she saw that Satsuki was pulling her punches, an action that she found both understandable and regrettable. Given the girl's strength or lack thereof, there was no need for her little sister to go all out, but she also felt that there was no need to go easy on her and prolong the fight. On the battlefield, kindness was a weakness. The images of what happened to those who hesitated had been burnt into her memory by her Sharingan and would haunt her for the rest of his life. The horrors that she had witnessed at the end of the Third Great War had taught him one valuable lesson: if a conflict couldn't be avoided, it should be ended as fast and as ruthlessly as possible. She would have to find a way to impart her sister with that valuable lesson. Winner. Uchiha Satsuki. She forced a smile on her face as Satsuki's victory was declared and their mother rose to her feet, cheering happily and enthusiastically. The smile gained a little warmth as she saw color rise on her sister's cheeks at the woman's extravagant and rather loud proclamations of how proud she was of her baby girl. It was a good thing that their father hadn't deigned to come, as he would have frowned heavily on such behavior. Izumi smirked a little predatorily. Not that she would let that stop her. Boruto, Sakura and Naruto, please step onto the ring. The elder Uchiha heiress's eyebrows rose imperceptibly. She glanced at the Hokage and his wife, who were sitting a few spaces away, and noticed that they didn't seem to take notice of the instructor's omittance of their son's family name. Her mask slid back into place, although nobody would notice the difference. Like anyone else in the village, she was well aware of the general enmity towards the Namikaze boy. While she herself didn't really care one way or the other, she did find the situation rather stupid. In her opinion, to treat the vessel as if it were the demon showed a pitiful lack of intellect. But to treat young Naruto, who held nothing but the Kyūbi's powerless soul, as if he were the source of all the fear they felt years ago. She let out a soft sigh that went unnoticed. The people of this village are all the same. They focus on the trivial and lose sight of what's most important. Change is impossible in this fog of ignorance. How can we evolve if our leader does nothing to clear it? She felt her respect for the Yondaime diminish slightly. Sacrificing the one for the many was a hard choice, but creating a scapegoat to comfort the populace when a firm hand was what they truly needed showed only bad leadership. Nonetheless, she would keep her silence. The instructor's disappointed voice broke into her musings. Naruto wins. Izumi blinked. A single punch to the face had ended the fight, and the pink-haired girl was now sprawled on the floor unconscious. The movement had been well executed, with none of the clumsiness that was seen in the other students. There had also been restraint and patience. He had waited for her to approach and then returned her own momentum against her. She was only slightly surprised when her mother cheered for the pseudo-Jinchuriki just as much as she had for her younger daughter. She always was a kind-hearted woman. She saw the boy go a bit wide-eyed in surprise at her mother's encouragement, and there was also a glint of recognition, which was strange since she didn't know when her mother could have met the young Namikaze. Naruto glanced at his own parents' lack of reaction to his victory and adopted a mask of indifference not too dissimilar from her own. Izumi quirked an eyebrow. Interesting, this one bears watching. He's kind of cute. Izumi smiled faintly, with a small blush on her face, for a second before it vanished. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. Naruto sat down and tried to ignore the warm feeling inside that the Uchiha woman's cheering had caused. It was starting to bother him that he still didn't know her name, but he didn't really have a way to find out what it was. He didn't want to ask his parents, and he certainly didn't have time to waste looking through the public files. Besides, as he mostly ignored his sister Dominator fight against Kiba. Maybe she'll be invited to Kasumi's birthday party and I can find out then. It's your birthday too, you know. He blinked. Kyūbi. I thought you were sleeping. The demon snorted. I'm a demon, I don't need petty things like sleep and food, even if they are rather enjoyable. Don't change the subject. Naruto sighed, drawing a curious glare from the civilian-born student that was sitting beside him. It may be my party too, but we both know that I'm only there because it would reflect badly on the Namikaze if I wasn't. I doubt they'll pay me the slightest bit of attention. The voice in his head grunted in agreement. Well, don't let that stop you from being productive. Make sure you take some reading material with you so that you aren't just wasting your time loitering about. Yes, of course. Alright. Now for the first quarter-final match. Namikaze Kasumi and Namikaze Naruto. Finally I can lose and be done with this pointless tournament. And he actually said my full name, wow. Why don't you cut down on the sarcasm and actually win for once? Naruto ignored his tenant's question and watched his opponent join him in the ring. He had to admit that, for all their parents' spoiling of her, Kasumi hadn't turned out too badly. She was prideful and believed that she was the best, but she wasn't overly arrogant about it like the Hyuga or the Uchiha who constantly shoved at others' faces. He let his wonder as the instructor blabbed on about something. His relationship with his sister was non-existent really. And it was mostly his fault. At first he had resented her for the attention that their parents gave her and denied him, but he had come to accept that it was hardly her fault. She had been a bit bratty about it at the beginning, but that was just how children were. He had little doubt that if their situations had been inversed, he would have acted the same. In retrospect, he could remember a number of occasions on which she had tried to play with him, only for him to blow her off in favor of his studies and training. Kasumi smiled at him hesitantly as they stood opposite each other, and Justy nodded back. Yes, their lack of relationship was his fault for almost the same reason that there was no bond between himself and his parents. He knew that, but he couldn't find much incentive to do anything about it. He was already contemplating the possibility of leaving the village at some point, and, even if it seemed like impossible right now, he wasn't going to bother getting closer to her just to leave later on. He stepped back gracefully as a fist came hurtling towards his head, keeping his weight well balanced despite being caught off guard. He had missed the instructor's signal to begin. He spun on his heel to evade the following punch and, following through with the rotation as his sister overextended a little, landed a sharp jab in the small of her back. Fortunately for his plans, his surprise hadn't prevented him from holding back, so she only stumbled a bit rather than being knocked to the floor. He held back a wince as Kasumi turned around to face him, shock written all over her features. Ha! Look at that. The one time you don't pay attention to the fight and you're already humiliating her. Naruto cursed under his breath. He would have to make a fool of himself now, so that people would be too occupied mocking him to question his sudden increase in skill, then they would just put it down to a fluke. But that in mind he charged his sister, fist beeped back for the punch. He paid careful attention to his footwork as his sister prepared her defense, positioning himself with pinpoint precision as their fists came towards each other. As planned, and despite his longer reach, Kasumi's fist slammed into the side of his head with a crunch and he was sent flying out of the ring. Ignoring Kyūbi's growl of disappointment, he briefly wondered if it was weird that he felt a certain pride in how well he had caused his own defeat. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. Naruto paid no mind to the party going on around him, sitting in a corner comparing two seals. This year had been a surprisingly good haul. He had gotten a book from Old Man Sarutobi, a copy of one of Mito Uzumaki journals that held several entries concerning the Uzumaki clan. He also got a handwritten book containing knowledge of famous events and recommendations on which books to read for more info from Bawako Sarutobi. His parents had been surprisingly generous, all things considered, and had gotten him a set of kunai made from a high-quality chakra-conductive metal. A slightly feminine monotonous voice broke into his figurative bubble of silence. "Good evening, Naruto-kun." Naruto looked up in mild surprise as Uchiha Izumi pulled up a chair and sat opposite him, gazing at him with an intrigued expression. Getting over his shock, the Namikaze nodded slowly. "Good evening. Izumi-san, right? Satsuki-san's sister." "That's correct." There was a nod and a pause. "I have a gift for you." Naruto took the scroll the young teen held out to him with a small bow of thanks. Unrolling it he saw that it was a generic storage seal with simple parameters. He read through the kanji of the seal with practiced ease, methodically picking out the details of the pocket dimension it created. The 1.5 meter diameter. A maximum weight of 10 kilograms. No propulsion upon unsealing. The scroll and ink are sturdy and of good quality, but not the high-quality stuff that's used for important seals. It's just a basic active duty storage scroll. It could hold anything from a big ball of iron to a fluffy feather hat. He looked back to the older girl. "May I ask what it is?" Izumi quirked an eyebrow, her lips twitching up in amusement. "Do you not have an idea?" Naruto frowned. "The seal is rather all-purpose, it could hold anything." His frown deepened when the Uchiha nodded as if a suspicion had been confirmed. Izumi offered a small but genuine smile. "I'm impressed, Naruto-kun. You have a good knowledge and understanding of Kenjutsu for your age. I suspected that there was more to you than meets the eye when I saw you throw the match against Kasumi-chan during the tournament." Izumi chuckled when her remark caused the younger boy to stiffen. "Do not worry. I have no intention of informing anyone of your true skills. Well, you did do a very good job of masking your initial success and making your defeat seem natural. Any observant shinobi should have been able to detect the subterfuge. If they are too blinded by their own prejudice to see what stands before them, I have no reason to correct their misconceptions." She chuckled again when her words made him sag a little in relief. "As to what the seal contains, a sword. A plain Anbu issue ninjado. I'm sure you can find a use for it." Naruto's eyes widened. He had tried to get a sword for his Kenjutsu training, but he was too young to legally buy one, and his parents had refused to get one for him, saying that he could start training when he had a Jinin sensei to supervise him. It was one of the things that he truly resented them for, especially his mother, because his Uzumaki heritage made him eager to learn the art of the sword. But being denied the tool that would allow him to start at least the basics of swordplay, it was almost an insult to his ancestry. Naruto bowed, a good bit lower this time. "Thank you, Izumi-senpai. I assure you I will put your gift to good use." Izumi replied, "If you need any help with your Kenjutsu training, come to the Uchiha district and ask for me. I will gladly help you. You are welcomed at any time, my mother made sure of that." Naruto simply nodded and was slightly concerned on how she said any time. Knowing better than to unseal his gift in view of his parents and run the risk of it being confiscated, Naruto slipped the scroll in his pocket. He then went back to comparing the two seals he had been looking at for over an hour now, drawing a raised eyebrow from Izumi. The first seal was a printed one, torn out of a page of a common book for beginning sealers. The seal was the same, only handwritten in Naruto's own hand. It was a simple seal that worked a lot like a hot plate. By keeping a constant flow of chakra, it could be used to heat a pan and cook a meal. The problem was that, while both seals worked, Naruto's worked better. He had noticed completely by chance, but his provided a more constant heat, whereas the book one's temperature fluctuated slightly. Normally that would be a good thing, but what was really bothering Naruto was that he couldn't work out why his worked better. The kanji were all the same. The ink and paper were different, but that couldn't account for the differences he had observed. It was frustrating. He was interrupted by an upbeat and familiar voice. "What are you two doing squirreled away in your corner?" Naruto looked up to see the kind uchiha lady looming over them with her hands on her hips. A look in Izumi's direction told him that the older girl didn't plan on answering. Naruto gulped, uncharacteristically nervous. Izumi-senpai was just giving me a birthday gift to Uchiha-sama. The slight glare on the woman's face turned to a pout. No. That won't do, Naruto-kun. You can call me Makoto. Or Makoto-basan. No, that makes me sound too old. That's it. You can call me Makoto-nisan. Naruto blinked. Makoto-nisan. She nodded happily. Yep. Despite himself, Naruto felt a grin stretch his lips. He wasn't sure if it was her bubbly attitude or the fact that he finally knew her name, but the woman just made him feel like smiling. What's this you're looking at? Naruto's eyes widened as she bent forwards to look at the seals he had in front of him, her low-cut kimono inadvertently revealing a nice amount of cleavage. He dipped his head down. He could usually ignore it because of the general enmity he received from almost everyone in Konoha, but, with the accelerated development of his mind, he had also gained an early interest in the opposite sex. There were even a few times when he had caught himself looking at his own mother. This, while she was an attractive woman, was disturbing for more than one reason. Makoto remained completely unaware of his dilemma. Seals. You're studying Fukinjutsu, Naruto-kun. He nodded, keeping his face down to hide the slight blush that he was sure had crept onto his cheeks. Yeah, I'm trying to find out what's different about the two seals. She frowned and activated her Sharingan. Sorry, Naruto-kun, they look the same to me. Before he could respond, Kushina waved over from the other side of the room. Makoto-chan, come and have a look at this. Humming. Oh, before I forget, she turned, gave Naruto a box with a card, and ruffled Naruto's hair affectionately. Happy birthday, Naruto-kun. Izumi got up from her chair and picked up one of the seals in each hand. She activated her own Sharingan, looking at them both with a bit more scrutiny than her mother had. She handed them back. She's right, Naruto-kun, the only difference is the handwriting. Naruto sighed in disappointment. Oh well, thank you. For that and the gift too. Izumi nodded and walked off, disappearing into the crowd. Feeling a bit thirsty, Naruto got up and meandered over to the drinks table. Just as he started on his long glass of orange juice, another conversation caught his attention. He shifted over to a better eavesdropping spot. He only caught the end of Jiraiya's question. With the toad's brat. Minato's voice had just the slightest slur to it. He had obviously been drinking. Course I am sensei. I just hope it doesn't take too long. I don't want to stay away from the village. Jiraiya frowned. Don't think you can just breeze through this, brat. Sage training is a long process. If you try to rush it, you'll just end up taking longer. Besides. You don't have to worry about the village. Sensei will be sitting in for you, and I'll be sticking around just in case, so you don't have to worry about your family. Minato nodded a little morosely. I know. You'll take care of Kasumi, right? Maybe you can help her with Kyūbi's chakra. I think she's ready to start on that so long as you take it slow. It's a bit early, but I don't see why not. I'm gonna be here anyway, so I might as well give it a go. Minato nodded. So any tips you can give me for the training? How's it going to work anyway? Jiraiya groaned in annoyance. The short of it is that you have to learn to be one with nature by remaining perfectly still. Then you draw on the nature energy and balance it with your physical and spiritual energies. If you want more details, you'll have to wait and ask the Toad Elders. Minato's head bobbed up and down with the music, which combined with his slightly tipsy expression, was giving the impression that he was nodding like an idiot. And what about Kasumi? She was asking if she'll be able to do sage training. I told her that she'd have to wait, but… Jiraiya laughed. Already wanting to follow in her godfather's footsteps is she? I was going to have her sign the Toad contract when she graduated the academy, but maybe I'll let her do it early. I don't see why she wouldn't do the sage training. She'll probably be better than the both of us. The only real requirement is to have extreme chakra levels, and with Kyūbi boosting her reserves, there's no way she won't be able to. Naruto scowled as they chatted about more and more ways they were going to train his sister. Deciding that he had been at the party long enough to satisfy social politeness, he crept back to his room undetected. He had a sword to try out and a present to unwrap. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. Naruto was back in his room and it was nearing midnight. The party had died down 2.5 hours ago, the others fell asleep from all the excitement they had at the party. Naruto had been practicing his stances with his ninjato to get a feel for it as soon as he got to his room. Naruto thought he did surprisingly well for his first time with a real sword, but he knew that his stances was full of holes as he was not familiar to the weight of the blade. Naruto was ready to go to bed after the intense and long training section he just had. But it was not to be, as a giant fox had to say something. "Brat, check the present the damn uchiha female gave you again." "Panted, wait, I dead tired and sore from practicing with the ninjato. "I will check it in the morning after I wake and eat something," replied Naruto, laying in his bed trying to get some rest so that he could recover some energy for tomorrow's training section. "I demand that you check it again now or else I won't allow you to sleep until you do," bellowed the beast, waking up Naruto and giving him a headache. Fine, you don't have to yell. Your normal voice is already loud. Anyways, why does the present matter? It doesn't concern you really." Naruto though as he went to the present box that contained the gift from Makoto Uchiha. The gift in question was an old red, black, and gold metal pyramid that seemed to have a crystal in the middle of the pyramid. The pyramid was black triangular pyramid that had gold symbols on all three of the faces of the pyramid. Naruto didn't think that the symbols were seals, as they looked like nothing he knew of. Also on the faces were small design gaps that allowed a person to see a purple crystal in the center. At the base of the pyramid was a red spiral surrounded by 3 red arrows that pointed to the corners. The card Makoto gave it to Naruto explained that she believed that the artifact was created by the Uzumaki. The spiral seemed to reinforce the idea too. She gave it to Naruto as a gift because she knew that he would like it better than toys, as it seemed that Naruto wanted to learn more about his Uzumaki side if his research into seals was any indication. Naruto opened the gift as soon as he was in his room but only gave it a once over, after which he placed it back into the box as he was more interested in practicing with his new blade. To Naruto the present was kind of useless, but considered, it made him feel closer to his ancestors. Naruto pulled out the pyramid from the box again and looked over it again to satisfy Kyūbi and allow him some rest, even though he was curious as to why he wanted to see the gift again. As he looked over the pyramid he noticed that the purple crystal in the middle was faintly glowing, so faintly in fact the only reason he noticed it now was because his room was pitch black. Naruto wondered why it was glowing now as it wasn't when he saw it in the box. Naruto set the pyramid down and immediately noticed that the crystal stopped glowing. He picked it back up and it started glowing, and Naruto began adding chakra to the object to see if it had any effect, but unfortunately it didn't. Naruto spent the next couple of minutes trying to unlock the secrets that his ancestors may have hidden in it. He tried many things such as adding chakra directly into the crystal, into some symbols, into the spiral at the bottom, and even just pouring a large amount of chakra into the hole. But in the end it was a waste of time as it did nothing. "Kyūbi, you wanted to see the artifact again, now tell me why. Why is it so important? Answer me right now," demanded Naruto, getting annoyed by the gift, lack of sleep, and lack of progress. Naruto was starting to think that the artifact was nothing more a nightlight for kids. As Naruto was slowly getting angrier and yelling at Kyūbi for answer, he didn't notice that the glow of the pyramid was slowly growing the angrier he got. As he thought the last word the glowing reached its peak and then it shot a beam of blue light from the top of the pyramid. The blue light then quickly took the form of a 2-foot-tall man. The colors of the man were different tints of blue varying enough that you could tell the difference in colors. The man started to speak to Naruto in an unknown language, and even if Naruto knew the language he didn't know how he would have responded. Naruto and the man started at each other for about a minute until the man said something, with a sneer on his face, before disappearing. Naruto kept staring at the spot where man was until he heard the voice of the Kyūbi. "First of all, don't you ever demand anything from me, ever. Second of all, it seems that you're force sensitive." "Wait, what? What the hell is being force sensitive? And what did that pyramid just do?" asked Naruto as he came out of shock. "Don't worry about it for now, you will be told soon. Just get to bed." "I think you mean now instead of soon. I demand to know anything that involves me. The pyramid didn't activate when I poured chakra into it, but it did activate when I became angry. And last time I checked, when a Jinchuriki gets angry, it usually involves their Bijk. So that means that the pyramid was reacting to you, not me. I just told you to never demand anything from me. And you're wrong in your assumption about why the thing activated. I had nothing to do with it, but maybe my presence in you has affected you more than anyone has though. We will discuss this in the morning. Now sleep, it will be a long conversation, and I demand to have an audience that is awake and responsive." "Wait, we're not done talking," Naruto responded, but it was too late as Kyūbi cut the connection between them after he was done. Damn Naruto though as he tried to sleep but couldn't immediately. It took over 2 hours for Naruto fell asleep but through the night Naruto was restless. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. Dream. Naruto opened his eyes and found himself surrounded by darkness. Naruto looked around everywhere trying to see where he was. Until he found something different, he was taller, older, and wearing a brown cloak that reached to the floor and had a hood. Reality seemed to phase into existence in mere seconds around Naruto. Naruto looked around and saw that he was in a large metal room that design was like nothing Naruto has ever seen. In front of Naruto were large glass windows that overlooked a large futuristic city gleaming in the orange sunlight of the sunset. All around the city there were flying machines zipping and zooming from one location to another, going up, down, left, and right. Naruto focused backing in the room he was in and realized that there were other people besides him there. There were 5 people, 4 men and 1 female, sitting in front of him and they seemed to staring at him with a bit of anger and one of them, female, was speaking to him. As Naruto turned his gaze to the woman Naruto though, Altris. Naruto refocused himself and caught the end of what she was saying. Nonetheless you had no business investigating on your own. We're still rebuilding out ranks from the last war. We can't afford this kind of adventurism even if we were supporting it, said the woman in white with a stern voice. After she finished Naruto felt a spike of rage come from himself but he didn't know. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. Rise and shine kid. You slept and what a surprise. And here I thought you wanted to know what happened last night. Bron, so you're the one that woke me up just when it was getting good. Yes I did because last night you really wanted the information but now not so much. Were you having a nice dream? Did it involve a mature uchiha female and licking? Kyūbi said, mockingly at the end. I did have a dream last night and it didn't involve anything sexual Uchikura no Bakemono, chakra monster. It was strange and real, it felt more like a memory more than anything. But enough about the dream, explain what happened last night with the pyramid and what you meant by me being force sensitive yelled Naruto in the beginning but quickly became serious when he mentioned last night. Okay, before we get started let me lay down some ground rules. Rule 1. Everything I tell you is 100% true as I know it. Rule 2. Don't interrupt me when I am speaking unless I direct a question at you. Rule 3. I will tell you all I want to tell you, so don't ask for more information when I stop. Do you understand the rule? Yes I do, now let's get started. Fine you impatient brat. And with that the Kyūbi revealed many secrets to Naruto that no other person in the world knows. Naruto learned of the existence of the Galactic Republic and the technological wonders it had. Kyūbi even gave a brief overview of the Republic's history, since he admitted that he did not know too much on the subject, he also admitted that he even knew less about the technology. Something that Naruto mocked him about until Kyūbi threatened to not tell him anything. Naruto then learned about the Force, a brief history of it and its applications. Naruto learned about the Jedi Order, how it broke down and turned 2 into the Jedi Order, and then how a faction of the Order become the Sith. Naruto questioned how come Kyūbi knew more about the Force and the Orders than about the Galactic Republic. Kyūbi admitted that he was taught as a kid and as a youngling he was more interested in about Force and its history. Kyūbi compared it to a child liking the history of ninjas better than the history of the world. Kyūbi told Naruto that tiny living being, called midichlorian, in a person's cells, determined a person's ability to use the Force. Naruto has a strong connection to the Force because of his high midichlorian count of 10,000 per cell. Naruto asked Kyūbi if Kasumi could use the Force, as he was admittedly somewhat afraid that she could and then gain even more attention. However Kyūbi revealed to Naruto that no Jinchuriki can be Force sensitive since they have 0 midichlorian. The reason why is because of the tailed beast inside them. The Yauki of the demon is so strong, poisonous and corrosive that it kills all the midichlorian during sealing. But a Jinchuriki can use the Force if they are partners with a Bijk, since Bijk are very strong spirits and can manipulate the Force. The reason why Naruto has midichlorian is because he is not a true Jinchuriki and didn't have Yauki sealed within him to kill the midichlorian. And finally Kyūbi told Naruto that his present last night was a holocron, a Force device meant to be used as a learning tool. A Jedi or Sith imprints their mind into the holocron and when a student wants to learn about anything inside, they channel the Force into it to activate. But the device is somewhat useless to Naruto as he does not speak the language they do, the language of basic. Naruto asked Kyūbi to teach him how to use the Force since it would make him stronger. He also asked if he could learn basic so that he could learn from the holocron later on. After several annoying minutes later Kyūbi finally gave in to Naruto's request and immediately began teaching him. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. At the bottom of the Namikaze mansion grounds a pale blue light emerged from beneath a heavy-looking boulder, glowing eerily in the moonless midnight darkness. With a hiss and a small emission of smoke, the boulder shimmered and gained a more artificial appearance before lifting up a couple of inches and sliding to one side. In a blur, a team of 6 shadowy figures slipped out of a hidden sewer mouth, hugging to the darkness as they made their way undetected towards the large house. Reaching the front door, the lead figure pulled out a small slip of paper with lines and lines of kanji written on it. He carefully placed the slip in the center of the door and applied a little chakra. 6 pairs of eyes spun stared in anticipation and only calmed down when the door opened with an almost silent click. The team dashed in, wordlessly splitting off to complete their separate mission objectives. 3 went for the main bedroom to subdue the mother. She had been retired from active duty for over half a decade now, but they knew better than to underestimate her. 1 headed for the daughter's bedroom, Yaki suppressing tags at the ready in case she tried to resist. Another went towards the son's bedroom with a kunai already drawn for the kill. He wasn't important enough to risk taking alive, and from the way the rest of the family ignored him, he didn't have much value as a hostage. He would then join the first group and help subdue the mother. The last made his way towards the Yondaime's study to try and steal the secrets to his techniques and maybe find a way to control the Kyūbi's Yaki. Amamuri quickly passed through the corridors, up the stairs and into circular waiting section outside the study, barely looking around as he stopped in front of the seal-protected study door. He pulled out a pack of seal tags, lighting a small flare so that he could see the small numbers written in the bottom left-hand corner of each one. With his steady hands and hours of training, so as not to make any mistakes, he started applying each tag in the specific sequence he had been given during the mission briefing. The security seals on the door were of the highest quality. It was a major stroke of luck that they had even been able to procure these tags, so he couldn't afford to mess up. Position, order and timing all had to be spot on, or the whole thing would backfire. Luckily he had ample time. The others would stay in position until he gave the signal that his part of the mission had been a success or their target noticed them. If they were noticed they would engage their target and take them down, which should still give him enough time to finish. And if the shit really hit the fan, they all had a buttload of kunai with explosive tags. He placed the first tag 5 inches up from the floor and 22.5 inches from the right-hand border, funneled chakra into it and waited 3 seconds. He placed the second tag a 1/4 inch above the first, also activating it with chakra. A half second later he placed the third tag 30 inches down from the top and 4 inches from the right-hand border. Bush. He stiffened at the sound of what seemed to be wind rushing and started to feel himself being pushed, ever so slightly. He spun around to confront the interruption, but remembered that he couldn't stop until he had finished. He grabbed the 4th tag, hoping that he wasn't too late and cursing whichever one of his partners had let someone slip up behind him. His hopes were dashed when several 100,000 volts of lightning chakra fried him to a crisp. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. Naruto crept silently through the hallway, his chakra signature suppressed to levels only a sensor would be able to detect and his feet wrapped in soft socks so as to ensure the noiselessness of his footfalls. He knew the technique that would allow him to use chakra to create a small pad of silence, but keeping his chakra suppressed would make it harder and he didn't want to risk failing just because he tried to do too much at once. It had been 2 weeks since the birthday party, 5 days since his father had left for Mount Myaboku, and Naruto fully intended to make the most of the opportunity. Still dressed in his pajamas, just in case he got caught, he had made a short trip to the kitchen, pretending to get a glass of water while he was actually checking that the coast was clear. And now he was quickly making his way towards his father's study. Since he began his studies, Naruto had pilfered all the knowledge in the Namikaze library, copying most and stealing some of the ones he didn't think would be missed. He had made copies of everything in his mother's rather meager personal collection, easily bypassing the relatively low-quality security seals that she protected it with. He had also copied roughly a fifth of the extensive Konoha library which held both ninja and civilian knowledge, and he was slowly working his way through the rest. Now that his father was away for an extended period of time, he had a golden opportunity to acquire some of the scrolls and books that, until now, he had only been able to glimpse from afar. The rarest of the rare, the ones that even Kasumi couldn't swindle her way into seeing. Not that she tried overly hard, she was much more of a hands-on learner. Naruto froze as he stepped into the small circular waiting room that leads to the study proper. There was already someone there. A dark-clothed figure, fully equipped for a stealth infiltration mission, stood before the door to his father's study, using a small light to illuminate its surface. From the way the seals on said door were pulsing, it was fairly easy to guess that, whoever this was, they were trying to break their way in. Having placed small surveillance seals at the entrances to his sister's room, his mother's room, and the guest room that Jiraiya was sleeping in, Naruto knew that they were all still inside their rooms and probably fast asleep. So, somehow, someone had made their way past the impressive protection seals that coated the walls and gates surrounding the Namikaze mansion and into the mansion itself. all without being detected. The sudden and utterly unexpected appearance of this uninvited individual caught the young Namikaze boy completely off guard. For all his training and mental preparation, this single kink in his carefully planned out heist left him wide-eyed and panicked. He reacted the same way as a ninja would, on instincts. He quickly brought his hand up in front of him and made a pushing motion with the hand, just like he had been practicing for the last 2 weeks. "What did I just do?" Kyūbi snickered. "You just killed someone. All that training the last 2 weeks have paid off. That wasn't a half-bad force push you used, but you still are wasting too much of the energy. If it was perfect then the push would have sent him across the hall." That is right, Kyūbi started teaching Naruto the way of the force after his birthday and the small history lesson. They started with small things such as force speed, force jump, and force body, as all these techniques had chakra versions, thus making them easier to learn. After learn those 3 techniques, Kyūbi taught Naruto force push and force pull, as he was very satisfied with Naruto's progress. Naruto had a pretty easy time learn the force, thanks to his high midi-chlorian count of 10,000 per cell, his sheer determination to learn all he could, and his prodigal skills. This didn't surprise Naruto or Kyūbi as Naruto showed the same determination in learn his ninja skills. Though his skills were great, they were still very much beginner level as he could not completely control the amount of force he put into the skills, he always wasted too much power. At the same time as he was training in the way of the force, Naruto has been learning to read and write basic and continuing his shinobi training. Naruto thanked the gods and the force that he learned Shadow Clone. The 2 weeks have been hectic for Naruto. He was so lost in his thoughts that he failed to notice that the other thief had become aware of his presence. Then there was a distinct smell of cooked meat, which quickly turned to a rather nasty smell of burnt meat, before finally stopping at the horribly charred odor of horribly charred human flesh. With a dull thump the dead eye would drop to the floor. Naruto blinked, but Kyūbi asked the question. "What just happened?" A quick glance was all Naruto needed. I think he was trying to hack the security seals and messed up. And he must have really messed up because that array is designed to shock on the first and second attempts and only kills on the third. He frowned. For it to lash out like that, the seal must have detected a high threat level to its integrity, and since the guy wasn't trying to enter through blunt force, that means that he was doing a pretty damn good job of disarming the array. Kyūbi sighed. "Whatever. What does that mean for you? Will it make your job harder? You're going to have to adapt your plans." Naruto looked at the smoking corpse with distaste and nodded. "You're right. Even if I seal the body and get rid of the smell, Minato will see that there was an attempted intrusion when he gets back and he'll probably change the seal. It's taken me long enough to get this opportunity as it is, that would just make my job harder. Maybe I can." He trailed off as a plan started to form. He put his glass of water down to one side and stepped over the still smoldering corpse. After pulling off the remains of the 3 tags that the now dead ninja had been using, Naruto ran through the hand seals needed to unlock the door. Getting them hadn't been hard. All he had to do was sit nonchalantly in a corner of the room, pretending to read a book while actually watching the sequence out of the corner of his eye. His father just didn't consider him enough of a risk to put any effort into hiding them. Naruto pressed his hand to the door and let his chakra flow in, forming it into a precise key. This was the part that had required the most effort. He had needed to identify the seals that Minato had used because the hand seals alone were not enough. If he were to compare it to a normal key, he would say that the hand seals defined the metal that it was made of, but the actual shape required understanding and knowledge of the array. If Minato were to change the combination, Naruto would have to start all over again. With a tiny click the door opened. His eyes widened when he sensed Jiraiya sneaking out of his room, and he silently cursed himself for not adding more surveillance seals so that he could track his movements. Hoping to finish up before it was too late, Naruto dashed into the room and gathered every book, scroll, file, and random sheet of paper onto his father's desk. He then took 2 blank scrolls and painted a generic seal on each. He sealed everything into the first and pocketed it. His eyes widened again when he heard sounds of fighting and realized that the thief wasn't alone. Naruto's heart thumped loudly in his chest as the situation started to really get to him. He dashed back to the study door and closed it carefully, nodding in satisfaction when it sealed shut. He then rummaged through the dead ninja's pouches and found a number of generic storage scrolls and a buttload of kunai with explosive tags. He grinned as his plan suddenly became a bit easier. Naruto pulled out all the storage scrolls and sealed a single kunai into each so that Beepasis would show that they had been used. He then picked up one of the remaining kunai, briefly wondering why the guy had brought so many on what had to be a stealth mission, and slashed all the seals so that their contents were irretrievable. He stashed the scrolls back into their respective places in the man's gear and stood up. "I don't know where everyone is, so I can't risk going back to my room." His eyes traveled to the explosive kunai in his hand, then to the glass of water sitting by the corridor door, and finally to the dead guy. "Fuck. This is gonna hurt. Stealing his resolve, Naruto ran into the corridor, not even thinking to check if anyone else was in sight, and painted an array that combined a basic storage seal with a seal masking seal before sealing the stolen goods into it. The array worked to perfection, taking his spoils away in a puff of smoke before vanishing from sight. It wouldn't take much to find it if someone was actually looking, but otherwise it should go unnoticed. He picked up his glass of water and stood in the entranceway. With a silent prayer, he swung his arm up and threw the kunai into the waiting room. It landed with a clatter next to the dead ninja and fizzled for a few seconds before exploding. Naruto's world exploded in pain as he was slammed against the corridor wall, unconscious before he even hit the floor. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. Burns from the expel. Glass embedded in his hand. Fragment of pajamas. Naruto blinked, his eyes open and groaned, barely noticing the fragmented conversation that reached his ears. Sweet Kami-sama, what hit me? An explosive tag, that's what? One that you threw. What kind of stupid plan was that? He blinked again. Kyūbi. He shivered at the anger he could feel rolling off of his tenant. Who else would it be, you idiot? Do you realize that you almost got us both killed? What the hell were you thinking? Naruto groaned at the volume of its voice and brought a hand up to rub his forehead. I didn't think the explosion would be that bad, I don't understand why, damn. What? Naruto winced. I forgot to take into account that we were indoors. The explosion was contained, so the blast was concentrated on the only area it could leave. Kyūbi growled. And that just happened to be the exact same place your idiotic self was standing. Before the demon could get a rant going, Naruto's attention was captured by a familiar face popping into his line of sight. He blinked a few times in surprise. Jiraiya-san, what happened? Naruto mentally patted himself on the back as he expertly pulled off the confused child act. Jiraiya frowned. That's my question, brat, what happened? Naruto blinked. I went for a glass of water. He scrunched up his face as if he were struggling to remember. Then I saw Otu-san, and then I woke up. Where am I? Jiraiya's frown grew more pronounced. Your father's not here, brat, what do you mean you saw him? Naruto shrugged. He was going to his study, but then I talked to him and then I woke up here. Naruto held back a smirk when he saw the Sanin's eyes light up in realization. He had done his best to make his description seem innocent and unsuspicious. He didn't know how much had survived the explosion, but apparently there was enough for Jiraiya to come to some sort of conclusion. Alright, brat. You get some rest and you'll be able to leave in a few days. With that said, Jiraiya left the hospital room. Now that the pervert is gone, we can continue our conversation about how dumb your plan was. I mean, who the hell thinks that using explosives inside a building is a good idea? Was the work in the study really worth it? Sorry, I didn't have time to think my plan through. After all, the intruders messed up the original plan of just copying the information. But the outcome was better than any other, even if I hurt myself and end up in the hospital. The scrolls and books I stole will allow me to expand my knowledge about seals, which I remind you caused 3 nations to band up together to kill a clan that focused on genjutsu. Seals also stripped you of power and sealed you into me, and finally summoned a deity. So yay, the damage to my body and the risk of being caught was worth it. I guess that you're right, but I believe that you could have created a shadow clone to knock you out. That would have been less dangerous and stupid than your plan. Anyways, ignored your stupid plan, the information in the scrolls and books will be useful to us, as they could tell you how to break the seal and free me, said Kyūbi, followed by an afterthought, without killing you, of course. Yay, but I really doubt that, but I will still try. My life is more important than your freedom to me. Yay, whatever, Kyūbi said, very dismissively. Let's stop talking about your screw up and talk about how well or improving you telekinesis. That force push was good. You will have to continue training the current skills I have taught you until you don't waste any energy. After which I will teach you how to heighten your senses through the force, something I am a master at. I believe that it will be easy for you to do, as it is similar to heightening your senses using chakra. So basically it's a weaker version of chakra enhanced senses. After all, force speed doesn't increase your speed, but allows you to maintain sprinting speed longer. No, force techniques are not always weaker than chakra ones. Like foresight increase your eyesight and allow you to see beyond solid object, just like Byakugan. My mastery of the 4 senses allow me to detect any threat to myself from anywhere in the world. I can sense any negative emotion anywhere around me. I can. Okay, not all force techniques are useless, I admit, but please stop the ranting, it's annoying. But I do have an important question, is there a force version of Kenjutsu? Yes, there is a force version of Kenjutsu, it is used by the Sith. It is called Sith runes, and unlike Kenjutsu, runes need to be carved instead of written. Sith runes, along with Sith alchemy and Sith ritual, fall under the category of Sith magic. And before you ask, I don't know how to use or teach Sith runes, alchemy, or magic. Damn, they seem so interesting to learn. I think that you can learn Sith magic and its sub-skills from the holocron. That's great, but I barely understand and speak basic, so how will I communicate with the gatekeeper? I can dump all the knowledge I have on the language in your head. Before you even ask why I didn't suggest it before, the reasons are very simple. 1. You didn't have enough training or experience for the technique to work safely. Even now it would be better to wait and have to train more so that it would be safer. 2. Learning the language through teaching is better just having the data dumped in your mind. 3. This process is very painful and you may gain some of my memories and emotions, but those are usually temporary. 4. For the next week or so you will be speaking and writing in basic, though it might interchange with this one a couple of times. So do you still want to go through with the data dump in spite of the risk, or is your carving for knowledge and power greater than the risk? Go through with the process, the risks are worth the rewards, just like the incident with the study. And this is the best time to do so, after all I am in a hospital, they will fix me up in fear of my family. Fine, try not to scream too loud, ha 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 ha. Ah, yelled out Naruto, before he blacked out. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. Naruto walked down the street toward the Namikaze mansion with a deep frown on his face. All around him people were glaring and muttering under their breath. There he is. Demon. Huge explosion. Dozens killed. Market district severely damaged. Stupid villager, mumbled Naruto in basic. Naruto had long since learned to not pay attention to the mutterings that followed him when he walked through the village streets. He would keep an eye out for the occasional thrown object or the groups of rowdy teenagers that found sport in pestering him. Since he only really left the mansion to go to the Konoha library or to the academy, he didn't have to put up with it too much. Now however, things seemed to have gotten a lot worse. As soon as he left the hospital, and even during his stay at the hospital, he had noticed that the mutterings and glares had become decidedly more malicious. From what he had gathered from snippets of overheard conversations, almost half of the entire market district in an explosion. Of course everyone was aware that Naruto had somehow ended up in the hospital that very same night and thus were more than happy to jump to the conclusion that it was his entire fault. Konoha had become more than a little arrogant since their relatively easy defeat of the most powerful Bijk, so this nasty event served as an unwelcome reminder of their own vulnerability. The fact that the deed was done by one of their most praised shinobi only made it an even harder blow to swallow. They just wanted a scapegoat. Whatever, I need to get home quickly, time stops for no man, and neither does my training, Naruto said, though people didn't understand him and though he was speaking in tongues, which further provide to them that he was a demon. Naruto eventually reached home without much trouble from the good citizens of Konoha and went to his room without any acknowledgement from his family. As soon as he got to his room, he shut the door and activated his security and privacy seals. After making sure everything was okay and nothing was out of place, Naruto took out the holocron and channeled the force into it to activate. Immediately the pyramid glowed and shot out a beam, from which a blue person formed. You're the same brat from before. What do you want? Are you here to waste time like last time? Said the hologram figure. Yes, I am. The name is Naruto and I want to learn Sith magic, Sith runes, and Sith alchemy. Do you know how to use them? Oh, by the way, last time I didn't know basic and could not speak with you, said Naruto. Yes, I know them, I am Ixer-kun, the once a great GD and the greatest Sith Lord, said the named Ixer-kun, who then smirked. Anyways, let's get started. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. 2 years later. Are you sure that it's down there? Asked Naruto, as he was standing at the edge of a cliff and looks down into the ravine. For the last time, yes, I am sure that there is a starship down there. So just use your chakra to surface walk down the side of the ravine, and then I will guide you to the location of the ship, which is just a bit downstream, said the annoyed demon to the doubtful human. Though the plan seems simple and likely to succeed, I can't help but feel like this is a plan for my death and your release. And how do you know for sure that there is a ship down there? You have been trapped for more than 100 years in human, so you couldn't have checked. Do I need to keep on reminding you that I am a master at Force sense? Even without my chakra I still have the force, even though I don't know how to use it myself for anything else other than sensing. Anyways, I am as sure that the ship is down there as I am a female. You're a female? Why have you never told me before? I always assumed that you were a male with that voice of yours. Yelled the surprised Naruto. Well, despite the nice conversations we have, I still don't like you. So I would keep some secrets from you and tell you some lies. After all, you are the human that is keeping me from freedom. Telling you my gender is a sign of trust from me to you. This partnership has been very interesting and you haven't done anything for me to change my mind about you. If it continues this way, then I will tell you some more secrets about myself. But enough with this, go down the ravine now. Okay, well, down I go, kick behind, and with that said Naruto started to walk down into the deep ravine. Everything was going well for the first 50 feet until Naruto slipped off the side of the wall. Aye. Screamed Naruto. What the hell happened, who did you fall off? Yelled Kyūbi at Naruto. The sides of the ravine are wet and slippery. At the top it was fine as the sun dried the sides, but down here it was still wet. I slipped because I didn't put enough chakra to compensate for the wet rock. Now please shut up, I think I can slow down enough to not kill myself, Naruto answered before breaking the link and focusing on his plan. Ton Suitor plus Mu, wind release stream, said Naruto as he released a large stream of air below himself. The technique managed to slow Naruto down, but not enough to not die when he hit the water. Naruto decided against putting more chakra into the jutsu as he thought it would make no difference and instead channeled both chakra and the force into his body so that it could withstand more damage. As Naruto neared the river at the bottom he braced for impact, but 20 feet from impacting the water things got worse. There was a rock formation protruding out from the side and Naruto's left side struck it. The rock created a gash on the left side his chest, allowing a person to see 2 of his ribs. The impact also dislocated Naruto's left arm, making it useless. The only good thing was that the crash slowed Naruto's fall to 1/3 of the speed. Naruto splashed into the water head first, aggravating Naruto's injuries. The pain was too much for Naruto to handle that he could not control his movement in the rapidly moving river. He was thrown all around the river, crashing into walls and rock, giving him minor cuts and bruises. Naruto's shouts of pain caused him to drink water and start to drown. I guess I have to do all the work now, don't I? Said Kyūbi as she temporarily took over Naruto's body. She managed to control Naruto's body and rode the river's current until they came across a cave. The cave was really a hole in the ground from where the ship crashed landed. She managed to enter quickly before the ship was flooded. After closing the door and making sure there was no danger towards Naruto present, she relinquished control of his body, as taking control with her limited energy supplies tried her out. 0 degrees 0 degrees 0 the next day 0 degrees 0 degrees 0. Ooh, groaned Naruto as he woke up. He started tossing and turning a bit, but that stopped when he accidentally rolled over on his damaged left arm. Son of a bitch, Naruto painfully muttered. I see you awake, so how was your beauty sleep, princess? Mocked a tired Kyūbi. Bro, shut up, this isn't the time for you sadistic personality, just tell me the damage. And why do you sound tired? Aren't you an all-powerful demon? The reason I am tried is because I used up all my stored up energy to save your worthless self and I don't even get a thank you. Don't even try say thank you now, so forget it. Now onto the injuries, you have 1 dislocated left shoulder, 1 broken rib, 3 bruised ribs, a gash on the left side of your chest, multiple cuts and bruises around your body, and the top part of your right ear is gone. Are you serious? Yes I am, can't you feel the pain? Yes I can feel pain. Groan, why can't I see from right eye? Is it damaged? Am I blinded in that eye now? No, you have a cut above that eye, blood must have dripped down into it while you were asleep. Anyways, let us stop with this pointless chatter, we came for the ship and anything used from it. So started looking and learn all you can, after all you love technology. Okay, and with that being said Naruto went looking throughout the ship. He tried to get to the bridge of the ship, but unfortunately the crash destroyed half of it and the rest of it is flooded. Naruto checked all the rooms in the ship and saw that the cabins were high-end, most likely for more upscale clients like wealthy merchants and noble politicians. Naruto then reached the cargo bay and saw several dozen crates in there, along with a gold medal man and 3 things that Naruto recognized as speeder bikes, though 2 of them were damaged. Naruto checked out the crates and what was inside made him rethink that the ship belonged to a merchant or politician. The crates contained many different weapons, they contained various blasters, vibropons, and explosives. There were enough weapons there to supply a small army. Naruto accessed the computer terminal in the cargo bay and found out that the ship was a modified HWK-290 that belonged to the Black Sun, a huge crime syndicate. Other than some information about past jobs, Naruto found nothing useful in the computers. He decided that the ship was useless to him as it was too damaged for him to fix, but the cargo was useful to him. He created a shadow clone with a one-hand seal, Naruto used one-hand seal and created the clone without his injures, which cost him nearly all his chakra. Naruto had the clone seal up everything into several of his custom storage scrolls, except for the working speeder and a military-grade thermal detonator. The clone set the thermal detonator to detonate an hour after he left so that the ship would be destroyed. After that Naruto and the clone got on the speeder, the clone driving, and headed down river until he could get out of the ravine and back to the village. So I see that you found several things useful. Yay, but I was hoping that I could use the ship or that it would have minimal damage and be a quick fix. But the damage was too extensive, the How Bridge was crushed in flood, damaging who know how many systems. Sigh, at least I got the weapons, if needed I can sell them when I get to the galaxy for credit or I can use them to create an army here. A droid I can repair or modify, I think as an assassin droid would be my best bet. Or I could sell it to Suna, they always wanted to create an automatic puppet, aka droid. So the trip was worth it. Maybe. The end. So how was this part? I hope you like it. And if you like it, share this part with your friends and like the video too. And don't forget to subscribe our channel for daily awesome fanfiction. Okay, it's time for me to go. Bye bye.